I'm Michon Boston.
And I'm Taquina Boston. Invite historical drama fans you know to subscribe to Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters wherever they enjoy their favorite podcast. Subscribers receive notifications about new episodes and bonus content.
Sign up for our newsletter on our webpage at michonbostongroup.com/Boston Sisters or on our Instagram bio link at Historical Drama Sisters and receive news and announcements about upcoming podcasts and historical drama activities. Enjoy the podcast, and thank you for listening. Welcome to Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters. I'm Michon Boston.
And I'm Taquina Boston. In this podcast, we're talking with Native American filmmaker Billy Luther about his 2023 feature film, FRYBREAD FACE and Me. Set in 1990, FRYBREAD FACE and Me follows 11-year-old Benny from San Diego and his precocious cousin Dawn, also known as FRYBREAD FACE, as they bond during a summer with their Diné-speaking grandmother at her ranch on the Navajo reservation in Arizona. It's a transformative summer for Benny and Dawn, who are learning more about their family's past, their culture, and themselves. Written and directed by Billy Luther, FRYBREAD FACE and Me is produced by Chad Barris and executive produced by Taika Waititi. The film features Keir Tallman as Benny, Charley Hogan as Dawn or FRYBREAD FACE, Martin Seinsmeyer as Uncle Marvin, Kahara Hodges as Aunt Lucy, and Sarah Natani as Grandma Lorraine. FRYBREAD FACE and Me is currently available for streaming on Netflix with a subscription. Michon and I chose FRYBREAD FACE and Me because it is a coming-of-age story that is set in the 1990s and is told from a Native American perspective. The film reminds us of stories told by friends and family about childhood summers spent with grandparents and other relatives, mostly in the South. These were not summer vacations. There were chores to do, but most important, summer was a time to bond with grandparents and extended family, including cousins, and to learn about family history, stories, and culture.
FRYBREAD FACE and Me is the first feature film by Billy Luther of the Navajo, Hopi, and Laguna Pueblo tribes. Billy launched his filmmaking career in documentary films, beginning with the award-winning Miss Navajo, which aired nationally on PBS's Independent Lens in 2007. Billy's second documentary feature, Grab, premiered at the 2011 Sundance Film Festival and aired nationally on PBS. Billy's short documentary film, Red Lake, had its world premiere at the 2016 LA Film Festival and was nominated for Best Documentary Short at the 2016 International Documentary Association Awards. In 2018, he launched his web series Alternative featuring Indigenous fashion designer Bethany Yellowtail for PBS's Indie Lens Storycast. Recently, Billy Luther is story editor, writer, and director for the AMC Plus series Dark Winds, based on the detective novels by Tony Hillerman. Welcome, Billy, to Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters.
Hello, Boston Sisters.
Good to see you again.
I know. It's been, we tend to see each other every 5 to 10 years, right?
Yeah, we need
It seems like that, yeah.
We need to get better at this.
I know, too.
So, Billy, Taquina and I, okay, speaking of which, we met you here in D.C. when I was doing screenings of your documentary, Miss Navajo, which is about a young Navajo woman competing for that title in a Navajo cultural pageant. Talk about your journey from documentary filmmaking to now narrative filmmaking and series and storytelling. How has this informed the storytelling you're doing now?
Well, fresh out of film school, I'm a writer. I've always written, as a kid and telling stories. So writing just came natural, to me as a kid. After film school, I moved to LA and was writing scripts here and there and not finishing them because you usually stop at page 30 because you're like, what am I doing? So I was writing a script based on my mother's experience, starting to write the script based on my mother's experience as being Miss Navajo in the 1960s. She was early 20s. And that story of being Miss Navajo had been in my life growing up. And I was searching for material to write, and that was always, present. So I was like, this is it. This is the story. So I went to the Navajo reservation and began to interview former title holders to kind of get my script and characters, together. And once I came back to LA and started transcribing these interviews, I realized that these women had so many different unique stories and perspectives of their year. Because at the time when we started filming, it was 50 years, 50, of this pageant. So the different decades, different opportunities that these women had and didn't have, they all, came to the forefront. And so it just blossomed as a documentary. And it was a cheaper way of telling a story. I just had to borrow a camera and just go with a camera person and a sound person and just go to the res from LA. And that's kind of how my doc filmmaking, my nonfiction career started. And I didn't know I was going to be a documentary filmmaker, but after Miss Navajo premiered at Sundance, people were like, what's next? And started to gain momentum in the doc world.
So it sounds like actually you were a storyteller, but your first films were you taking your storytelling, your narrative into documentary versus documentary flowing into your becoming a narrative filmmaker. That narrative filmmaker was always there, actually, it sounds like.
Yeah. And it's with documentary storytelling, you're following the story. You don't necessarily know what the end product is going to be.
Yeah.
And love that kind of openness and free and surprises that come along. And I don't think it's that different from writing. When you write at a blank page, when you look at your keyboard and you're writing, you don't know yet. So your mind goes into this free flowing, put things in and you take things out. And I just feel that there's a connection with both that's closer than farther apart. And I love it. I still love documentary. I still love working in that genre and that form of nonfiction. And it just came natural. And it was a really easy, I think, way to get into my career as a filmmaker. I shouldn't say easy.
Nothing's easy. Nothing's easy. Right. Yeah.
It was just a little bit more ease, I think, into that world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't have to go through that 10-year development process that some fiction films have to go through, etc.
Yeah,
exactly. And I was struggling when I was in LA trying to tell my stories. I didn't have a resume that was full of short films, and I didn't have any of that. So what I did was I just borrowed a camera and just went to tell the story. That's all I had, and I self-funded the film. And then, as I started forming and shaping the film and editing, public television came in and gave us the funds to complete. So I think anybody who's looking to do whatever they want to do in life, is just jump into it. And that's kind of how both Miss Navajo, my documentary, my first, and then FRYBREAD, also my first narrative feature.
Yeah. Think what it would have been like if you had access to the web like folks do now and producing things on your own channel.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
different world. Yes.
Yeah. I think web series were out when Miss Navajo came. It just wasn't as frequent.
Well, that was like Miss Navajo. Can you believe 20 years ago? Yeah. Really.
Oh my goodness.
I know. And I don't know. I don't remember social media being, I don't know. I don't remember. It's 20 years ago.
People were still trying to get folks to use email back 20 years ago, right?
We'll have to do a little history research, digital history.
The evolution of digital, yeah.
Because when I was trying to find these Miss Navajos, early on to go out and film them, there was no emails for it. They didn't have I had to physically call each one of them. Hey, can you meet me at Denny's at like 8 a.m. on this day? So it was all paper and, map quests to find their homes on the res. It was just like use printed papers and all of that. So yeah, there was a little bit more work back then.
Billy, our podcast, we call it historical drama. That's our brand. And we extend our topics and now the films and series that we cover to the 1990s. That's sort of our time frame. Let's talk about FRYBREAD FACE and Me, because it is great that we have something from the 1990s, and that's the primary time frame or the setting for FRYBREAD FACE and Me, and it's in Arizona. And you've said in previous interviews that the film is semi-autobiographical. So tell us what parts of the story are from your own story, and why did you want to tell this story, those parts of your own story, as a narrative film?
Yeah, being multi-tribal, both my tribes are in the Southwest, Arizona, New Mexico. I grew up off the reservation in California, and my summers would be split. One summer would be in New Mexico on the Pueblo grandparents, and then the next month would be in Arizona, the Navajo reservation. And then I'd go back to San Diego to go back to school. So that was FRYBREAD FACE and Me, is Benny going to spend the summer on the reservation. And when I was in the reservation, I had aunts and uncles coming in and out of my grandmother's home. They would work and, bull riders, and so different family members. And my mother had 11 brothers and sisters. So there was a large cast of characters that came in and out. And then every now and then a cousin would pop in. So when you would see a cousin pop in, you hadn't really, you don't know them well enough because there was, social media wasn't back then. So you would just pop in and be like, oh, you're my cousin. Okay. And with 11 aunts and uncles, you had different cousins coming and going. And I just remember a cousin that was she was probably 7 and I was probably 12 or 13, and she was 7, and she was so confident. She was so a tomboy, messy hair, just rough and just so res. And she spoke the language, and she was my communicator for my grandmother and I during the summer when it was just us three. But she was there a couple times when I went to the my summers on the res. But she was such a character, and FRYBREAD was influenced by her. It's not 100% my cousin, but just somebody who was so secure in themselves and so loved the land and not really like, I want to move out of here. She was just this young kid who loved to jump around, play with the sheep, get muddy, get dirty, and I just fell in love with my cousin. So those are the elements that kind of are woven through the film. Of course, to create drama, you have to fictionalize things, and so it's not 100% my story, but you want to have an engaging, entertaining story. You want, but another thing was there was a lot of humor and laughter in my family, a lot, and that's something that I hadn't really seen in Native films, and I think it's really rare to see any Indigenous coming of age story. I hadn't seen it growing up, so it wasn't my focus on making the film, but it was just an experience that I had that was natural to me to tell. So yeah, those are similarities of Benny and myself, but everything else I think was fictionalized and yeah.
Yeah. Well, we hope that when people listen to the podcast, if they haven't seen a film or a series, that it will pique their curiosity to go watch it. So without revealing anything for people who are more plot focused, Michon and I, our thing is, how did they tell the story? If we know the ending, fine. But when you think about Benny, who was Benny when he came from San Diego to the res? And then who did he become as he was going back to San Diego after that summer with his cousin Don and his grandmother and his uncles and aunts?
Yeah. Benny, when he's at home, he's 11 years old. And at 11 years old, you're still figuring yourself out. You don't necessarily know who you are, but you're also living in a world that isn't indigenous. And I think when you live, for me, my experience is I was the only Native in the classroom. I was the only Native on the block. And this is the world that Benny lived in. And also, he's figuring himself out. He's playing with his G.I. Joe figures as soap operas. You could say he's kind of hiding his self, like who he is, through these macho G.I. Joe dolls, but also playing soap opera with them. And that's something that I did as a kid by asking my family to buy me these G.I. Joe dolls. And I was playing in the backyard, getting married. And so Benny's, kind of closed off, but also very curious and going to a place. I think everybody's gone to a place where they didn't want to go before. And then they end up their lives being transformed in some way. And so when Benny goes, it's lonely, it's quiet. There's no bus, there's no fire, there's no car or police car sirens. It's quiet. It's the reservation. It's such a different world when you go home to the reservation. That's the experience that I had with my grandmother's ranch. And sometimes there would be nobody except for her. And there was a loneliness to it. But then as you stay, it gradually, you accept the quietness, the stillness, and all you need is your grandmother's love, and that blankets you, and you feel at home. And, you roam, you're free. And in the beginning of the film, he's in the city, and it's so tight, and loud, and there's a lot of commotion happening in the diner outside. But when he goes to the reservation, you can see we use a wide lens and just show this openness, this vastness of this world that he's going into. So Benny goes and he's curious and he's trying to figure himself out. And with the help of his uncle and his aunt, and he's closely getting closer to kind of understanding who he is and family. And he leaves in a way that he's just more confident. He's much more confident, and as he doesn't have all the answers to life when he leaves, but he understands how family and his elders and his uncles and aunts, how their lives are complicated. And also his mother, and his parents. In the beginning, we see that the parents are having this difficult time in their marriage. And at the end, it's revealed that, and he's going back home. And it's complexities, I think, that he's experienced throughout, this journey that he goes on in the summer. And it's not this huge arc of, bam, he's like so transformed. It's a subtlety that I feel is larger. And then as you get older, as a filmmaker, me in my 40s, I had to understand, I could have written this story 20 years ago. I had to be an adult. I had to be a father. I had to understand all those lessons and experiences that I had growing up to tell this story. Because like you said, like not many people might have seen the film, but when you watch the film, you see these characters. You see Uncle Marvin, who's this hard male character that pokes at Benny, and those are questioning his identity and his maleness and sexuality in a way that really affects people. It affected me as a kid. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember those experiences. It's almost as if having so many relatives, when you have that kind of extended family, that you're also getting multiple perspectives on who you are. That sometimes they're seeing things that you will potentially become that you don't even recognize yourself. It's kind of fascinating the way family can be that way. And as you said, sometimes they're a little hard on you too, and it's not always pleasant.
Right. Yeah. And it's also set in the 90s, so there's no electricity on the ranch. There's no way to communicate. You can't call. There's no cell phones. And that's how it was and still is on the reservation. Some people still don't have running water, still don't have electricity. At the time in the 90s, when I was at my grandmother's, we'd have to go haul water, drinking water, haul water for the animals, livestock. There's no television, just had a generator that would rarely use because it was expensive to go get gas. Yeah, you just had to make your own fun, and that's what the beauty of it, because I think that those moments that I had, those experiences that I had at my grandmother really helped me, my imagination, and helped me it was a big influence on my storytelling and being a filmmaker. I was out open, whether it be herding sheep, an idea would come and I would go with my mind and act things out. And yeah, that's the beauty of home. That's the beauty of being secure in the people who you're around. Like my grandmother didn't judge me, and she was allowing for me to act things out and talk to myself. And I think that's the beauty of kind of just going home to the res. And I hope that most of us have had at going home to our grandparents. It was safe.
Yeah, yeah.
Billy, one of the aspects of Benny's coming of age is the film sort of touches on his queer identity, or it's sort of coming through, as you said, by playing with the action figures. We kind of get a hint of that. That's what I found so endearing in your film. It made me remember how we use our toys to sort of reflect what's in our thoughts, what's in our world.
And even explore our own identities.
And our identities. But as you just mentioned, the family's responses, with the exception of Uncle Marvin, when Benny's with his grandmother on the ranch, there's a difference in how they're responding around gender identity. Talk about how maybe it's the conflicting cultural attitudes, like Uncle Marvin, are represented, and also his Aunt Lucy, and his grandmother, even Dawn, and his other Navajo family members. How is it different there than it is in San Diego?
Yeah, well, I think, in San Diego it was much tougher, and I will talk about my experience, because my experience is close to Benny's. So if I go between Back and Benny and I, it's because they're close together. For Benny, living off the reservation, it wasn't easy. There's a little easier now to be who you are, whereas back in the 80s, 90s, it was much more difficult. You couldn't. You were teased at school, and you were bullied at school. And for me, it was much more difficult because I wasn't playing with the kids on the block, because I had to make my own safe place was to be in my own backyard and play with these ways. I had one friend who was a girl. She lived across the street, and I would play Barbies with her. She had Barbies. She had every Barbie you could imagine. That was like gold to me. So, and going to the res, it's the interesting thing to put into context of Diné and culture is, it was a balance of male and female in our creation stories. Our creator, Changing Woman, is female, and our matrilineal society, it's in our mythology and in our culture early on was our two-spirit trans people were considered holy, and that was always fascinating to me, and it was just something that stuck with me. That was just like, wow, this is so interesting to me. And it wasn't, until I believe it was religion and colonization that came in. You had people coming back from war, the trauma that they had, and also boarding schools where people were stripped of their identity and forced a religion upon them. And all that combined, plays a part in where we're at right now. And we're living in this world that we're told being who you are, or identity and sexual identity is wrong. And Whereas you go back into our creation stories, there's nothing wrong about it. You know, and also too with Pueblo, my Pueblo community, Pueblo tribes are heavily influenced by Catholicism, and yeah, I just feel that these contradictions and conflicts are so unique, and I'm always looking into it and discovering more information. So I know I went on this tangent, but I think what I'm trying to say is, yeah, it was not easier for him to go back to the reservation, but his grandmother understood him, understood who he might be trying to become, or wasn't judging him. Whereas where you have Uncle Marvin, this macho bull rider, I don't say necessarily what and why he is who he is, because I feel like a lot of us have these uncles.
Yes, we do.
Or this way. And there's no explanation. But for me, writing this character it reminded me of my uncle who went through the boarding school, that experience. And also was drafted to the Vietnam War. And he came back with those things, and also without a father. So those three things that my uncle experienced had an impact on me. And I was always wondering why my uncle was angry a lot, and always poking at the kids, you know. But like I said, in my 40s now, it all made sense to me. It started to make sense to me. I didn't feel like I needed to go through his backstory. I think whoever read the script when I was casting, or producers, they understood like, oh, I have an uncle like this, or don't need any explanation. But then we also have a really cool kick-ass aunt, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Aunt Lucy.
And we look up to our aunts, and I had more than one Aunt Lucy's. I had beautiful women in my life, and they were so warm and so embracing of who I was, and there was no judgment. And then in the film, Benny has that scene with FRYBREAD Face where they're putting makeup on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Aunt Lucy's putting makeup on FRYBREAD Face, and he's watching. And, you know, he gradually gets something and starts putting it on, and Aunt Lucy sees it and turns and helps him put it on. And that was basically, without saying it, but be who you are.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to judge you. And Fry too, she let him. So I think those are the moments that really stuck with me as I was growing up, and allowing me to be loved for who I was with these women. And the women in my family, I feel like I step back and look at the film, and this is a tribute to the women in my life. And it was so great to have the experience of being on the res and having that, but then going back to San Diego and realizing how much, you know, love that is I have back home. And yeah, so as a kid, I wasn't able to really be myself in San Diego. It wasn't until college I really couldn't be myself, because the places I was in, you were just gonna be ridiculed, bullied, and you know, it's yeah, you had to hide who you were in a sense. So
You've been enjoying Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters, a podcast where we talk about historical drama series and films as windows to the past and mirrors of the present.
Visit our webpage at michonbostongroup.com/Boston Sisters. Share this podcast. Join our historical drama community by signing up for our newsletter to stay up to date on future episodes and bonus content.
Now, back to our podcast conversation. You know, Billy, the film brings out, as you were talking about, the conflicts and contradictions around identity, which is something else I also can identify with. Having a family where people have hold a lot of different identities and ancestries. And it's almost like there's a debate about who's authentically Diné or who's authentically Navajo. And Aunt Lucy kind of dismisses Uncle Marvin. She said, yeah, oh, well, he's half Hopi. That's why he's like that. And Don asks, him, does he know what clan he belongs to? Which that's a question it seems like he hasn't considered before. And it's the grandmother who speaks only Diné. And it's very clear. She even says to Benny, don't use that white man shampoo. I mean, even the smallest things become associated with identity. So what's the significance of belonging not only to a particular tribe, but also knowing your clan? And you as someone who comes from more than one tribe, how does that play in terms of identity and who's considered you're part of us and who's like, well, you're only a little part of us?
Mm-hmm. Well, I could speak from my family, I mean, I was considered an urban native, right? When I moved from San Diego to Arizona, which was about 30 minutes from the Navajo reservation for high school, during my high school years, I wasn't accepted with the Navajo kids. And this is a high school that was 40% Navajo. And it was because here I came in, Billy Luther, dressed in skater shorts, had a skater haircut. And you weren't raised on the res. And also language too. I think language was a big part. I didn't speak my languages. Like I said, I have 3 tribes. So that was something that I realized that, gosh, I don't fit in here as well. There were family members, like I said, my aunties, weren't as judgmental, and I was able to just be myself and be multi-tribal because that's who I was. And I remember going back to my Pueblo reservation with my Pueblo grandmother, and she would make comments like, "Oh, you're half Navajo," but it wasn't like I hate what you. It's just tribes make fun of each other. We tease each other.
Yeah.
So those things always came, and comments would come, and so they're in the film. And it's difficult being multi-tribal, being 3 tribes, like who, and that's just something that I've always questioned. Who am I? We have different belief systems. We have different languages. We have different creation stories and mythology. And so they're conflicted. And I feel that has just been present throughout my entire life. And also when I was making Miss Navajo, that was another thing. When I'm following 5 young Navajo women, are you Navajo enough? That was something that was really fascinating to me when I was following these 5 young women, these Navajo women. Can you speak the language? That was a huge part of these young women who were competing. You could see the look on their faces when they were asked to, and the different experiences that you have as being indigenous or Navajo. So everything, I think, like with FRYBREAD, Aunt Lucy, she was this free-flowing, carefree woman who went from place to place, whereas Uncle Marvin was this guy who was kind of stuck there on the ranch, caring for his mother and the livestock and everything. I don't think, there's one experience that one could say you're Navajo or you're not, because there's, like my mother, she's in her 70s now. She's continuing to learn about Navajo culture. There's so many stories. It would take a life, beyond your lifetime, to know these stories. So we were always constantly learning and discovering different words and languages and of how to say things and creation stories. I think that your Navajo or enough, is from that colonized mindset, is are you Navajo enough? Are you indigenous enough? And I don't know, that's just been in my life, are you Navajo enough? Are you Pueblo enough? Hopi enough? Did I answer your question or?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, identity is complex.
Yes.
And when you try to essentialize it, it actually is part of the problem because, I mean, I remember going my first and only time in West Africa. Well, I was not regarded as one of the people, right?
Yeah.
I was seen as what I was. I was other in that culture, and I'm also other to some extent in American culture. And at the same time, I belong in American culture. So it's a both and. It's not a one or the other. And I think essentialism can be the problem, like who's authentically whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I was making Miss Navajo, the documentary, there was a contestant in the 90s. She was half Navajo and half Black. And she won Miss Navajo. And that created controversy within, the tribe and the community because they're like, wait, most people were like, she's not full Navajo. You should be full Navajo to be. But the thing was that she spoke her language. And the other people who were full Navajo who were running, some of them didn't speak their language fluently. So, I mean, that's huge in terms of that. That tells a lot. That tells, and I think with the films that I make, I'm always, my film always has that thread of identity in it because I learn from the work that I do. That's what fascinates me of telling these stories is I'm always searching for truth and identity and learning more about my culture and my community with these projects.
Well, speaking of what you're learning, let's talk about the young cast members for FRYBREAD FACE and Me. They're children of the 21st century.
Yes.
And they are learning something about the 20th century through gadgets and electronics and toys of those times. Tell us about your experiences working with the young actors and even what you just said about identity. Was this also a moment where they had some cultural connections, or did they already come with those cultural connections and were teaching you?
Yeah, when we were casting FRYBREAD FACE, Charley Hogan, we were casting during the pandemic, so everything was done during Zoom or through Zoom, and that's very rare because you should, as a director, you should go meet these people in person and be like, hey. So it was kind of like everything. It was so strange. Nothing that my first film was the way it should have been because it was really crazy, especially during the pandemic. But she sent her tape in, and I was like, I saw it the first like 30 seconds, and I said, "This is FRYBREAD FACE." So that she was cast, and she lived in Phoenix, and Kier also lived in Phoenix. Was very shy in his tape, and so we put him aside, his tape aside, and we started to continue to look, and I'd meet with him on Zoom, and as I was talking to him more, he was just so fascinating to me. He was just, I wouldn't talk about the film. I would just talk about, what he was doing. And that's what I really wanted to do is I just wanted to get him to kind of open up and not just talk about the film. But the both of them didn't live on the res. Both of them lived in urban environments in Phoenix. And I felt that was a good experience because when you're working with kids don't understand backstory. You can't be like, okay, Benny these kids were 11 at the time. So, and what was really interesting was Benny or Kier was living with his mother and his father lived out of state. And that was really interesting and fascinating to me just from his personal life. And FRYBREAD, Charley was learning Navajo, Diné, with her mother living off the res. They were really, focused on keeping the language in the family. So, the first time we all met was a week before we started filming in Santa Fe. And it was a crapshoot because I was like, I hope these kids have chemistry together because I'd never been in person together. So when that happened, I was like, when they had the chemistry, all of us were like at ease and like, okay, we can film now in 5 days. But They were both their first films. And what really is interesting is that they both identified with these characters. Benny here, he's like, I've been left at home, with my grandmother for a weekend or here and there. And Fry she's just this she's just this tough woman, young woman. So I think that they really understood these characters, and I didn't have to do so much rehearsals with them because I wanted them to be natural. I wanted them to, because I didn't want to give them so many notes before we started filming. I wanted them to just be who these characters are, or who they felt these characters were. And it was funny because we had to go back to the 90s, right? This is the 90s.
Right, yeah. No internet.
No internet, no cell phones. And we were getting the props ready, and Benny has his Walkman, right? His Walkman that he has with his Fleetwood Mac music. And he opened it, and Charley was there at the same time, but they took the cassette out and they were like, "What is this?" And I was like, "No, what is this?" And they didn't know it was a cassette tape. We're like, "It's a cassette tape, plays music." They were just so. It was so funny. It was a funny moment as we were miking them, and they were just kept looking at it, putting their eyes through the holes, that kind of thing. And that was really, those are moments that are really special that we remember, and putting them into the times of Air Jordans. I mean, how it was a big moment on these shoes, and also when we set up Benny's life back in San Diego, we have Pee-wee's Playhouse playing in the back. We have what's on his wall, movie posters, Gorillas in the Mist, which was I loved Gorillas in the Mist. I remember my art department were like, "Gorillas in the Mist, really?" And I was like, "No, really." I was obsessed with that movie as a kid. And just throwing these props and things into their hands, fanny packs, fluorescent colors that were vibrant in that time. But just setting. But when you go back to the res, even now, it's pretty timeless. I mean, what those kids were wearing, and what if you saw the film now, you'd be like, "Oh, that's what it is today too." It's timeless, And I felt that our art department did a really great job in presenting a world to an audience that felt very authentic.
Yeah, it took me back for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the great thing was that we had Navajos in our in all crew, but in our art department, and they raided my mom and dad's storage. So it was a lot of my grandparents' things that were on the walls, the utensils, the coffee, the television, all of that was from my home. And that was really strange when you're filming and you're like, this is
Yeah.
Even the G.I. Joe dolls that Benny holds.
Those were yours?
Those were mine as a kid. Those were
wow.
And so it was really important for us to set this tone, but also this life that we were creating on set. And everything on set, everything on the location was built. The shed, the sheep corral, we towed in the trailer. The Hogan was built for us. Like all of that, the world, the creating of this world was all by us, by our art department. And it felt home. It felt authentic. And whenever the Diné actors or crew were on set, they're like, this felt like we were going to Grandma's home. This felt like Grandma's. And even when Grandma was on set, Sarah Natani, she was like, whenever she was on set, it just felt like we were around royalty. Everybody, everybody from crew, makeup, everywhere. Like people were just making sure that she was okay and safe, and had an umbrella person next to her. But yeah, it was just creating this world for these kids, because once those kids had this world, they were able to play. And that's what I wanted them to do. I wasn't worried about them hitting their mark. Like, you go here, you go. We had this vast world, and like it is on the reservation, this ranch, you're free to roam, and my camera crew knew, and so we followed, and it worked out better that way. We were just got better.
Billy, I think we're going to ask two more questions, and I think one of them would be you have a very famous executive producer behind your first feature film.
Taika.
That's right,
Yeah.
Taika Waititi. And I think I met him around the same time I met you when he did his film Boy. Was that the name of the feature film?
Yeah, Boy.
Yeah, Boy. And he's from New Zealand, identifies Indigenous, and is an Indigenous filmmaker.
Maori.
Yeah, and you're good friends. What was his impact in bringing FRYBREAD FACE and Me and other Indigenous stories, which include Reservation Dogs, which has been phenomenally successful? What has been his impact in bringing your film and other Indigenous stories to the screen?
Taika and I have been friends for over 20 years, and the same as Sterling Harjo, the writer-creator of Res Dogs. We've been trying to make our films for many, many years. We were sleeping on each other's couches. We were in the same programs. We were just trying to make our films. And to see where everybody is now, working and, doing what they wanted to do, it's pretty incredible, because it just shows that we all never gave up, because it's a hard business. And, but yeah, Taika has been, an incredible person, an incredible friend. And since Boy, he has always invited me to watch rough cuts of his film. Thor, Jojo Rabbit, Boy, Hunt for Wilder, all these films that he had made, he would show rough cuts. That's what the incredible thing that he does is he gets about 15 people to watch these rough cuts. And then we give him notes and talk to him. And I love that process. And I learned so much from that. And we have this kind of dialogue of what we want more, what works and doesn't. And he was so open to the critique that I was like, gosh, this is great. I want to work like this, So when I had this script, I was kind of reluctant to have him read, because he was so busy. He's so busy. And I was like, hey, can you take a look at this? I'm writing, and I would like to kind of hear your thoughts. And he read it, and he's like, what do you need? And I was like, it would really be, helpful if you came on board as an EP, just to give feedback on cuts, maybe drafts of the scripts, and maybe kind of scenes that I want to have problems and I want to talk to you about. So cool. He was open. And same thing, he was an EP on Res Dogs, like you said. And that helped so much on my first film, having Taika on board. I was able to get meetings with people who probably wouldn't have met if Taika wasn't on board as an EP. And the script was getting around. And the script got in the hands of a producer of Dark Winds. They were creating Dark Winds, and that's kind of how I was able to get that job. But just having Taika on board was incredible. That's kind of what you need, and I see that now with filmmakers now that are emerging, and there's a project that I see that I really want to help or bring light to, I will want to help an emerging Indigenous filmmaker in that way, just as Taika did with mine, and as Sterling does to other filmmakers. It's exciting to see these young emerging filmmakers telling their stories from different perspectives, horror films and sci-fi films, which is exciting. These Indigenous films are going into different genres. So yeah, Taika's helped so much. And we premiered in 2023 at South by Southwest, and we had gotten some really great reviews, and it was a year before we got any distribution. It was a really hard year. Erica Tremblay with Fancy Dance was on the same boat as me. We couldn't get any distribution. And Ava DuVernay's Array, her distribution company, came in. and they became our distributors. So, and they have a launch on Netflix. So having Taika and Ava on my first project is mind-blowing. It's a dream come true. And it just, I pitch myself still to this day, like everybody who I've worked with, all the investors who came on board, they just loved the story. They fell in love with the script and the characters. And so did the actors and the crew. We all did it for love, and we had no money. We made this movie with nothing, but we all love these characters. And that's what I think. You see it on screen. You see it on screen. I mean, one of my favorite moments in the screen almost didn't happen was the first time Benny's getting his hair washed by his grandmother, and the lighting of the beautiful. She says, "Don't wear the white man's shampoo." We were wrapping our day, and when you work with kids, you only have 8 hours, and you shoot 12-hour days. So we were losing our kids. We had only 15 minutes, and the sun was going down. And I grabbed my DP and said, "Let's get Benny's hair wash right now." And so we did it, and because we were going to film it the day, and I said, "The lighting's perfect." Threw it, and Grandma was ready. She was almost ready to go back to her dressing room, and we just threw them together. And I said, "Grandma, say what you would say in Navajo to your grandchild. Say what you." There was no script. It just went at it, and it just became this beautiful scene. That's the beauty of storytelling. You find these moments and at the right time, and it became this moment that I was like, "Gosh, I remember that moment with my grandmother." And that I think people really responded to, and those that's magic. That's magic.
Yeah, hair is a big topic on this podcast too.
Yes.
We had a couple of conversations about hair.
Yeah, no, it is. It is like the film. Hair is knowledge. Hair is your memory. Aunt Lucy tells that to the kids, and hair is a big part of the film. Grandma says, "Don't walk around with your hair down." It's a cultural no-no. Your hair is up. Benny too. I don't know. It's just these things that just come natural that I look back and see. I'm like, oh, I made this. I presented this for people to talk about hair, and I didn't realize consciously that I was writing a lot about hair in my film. But even the hair washing, I was like, whoa. Even what Grandma says about not using the white man's shampoo, I was like, see, it's just part of our DNA.
Yeah. It's a thing.
It is. Sarah Natani, the grandmother on FRYBREAD FACE and Me, such a beautiful, weaver, traditional weaver. She was just a force, like I said, on set. But how I found her, when I was filming Miss Navajo in when we started filming in 2005, we had gone to Crystal's grandmother's ranch to help her.
Yeah, Crystal was in Miss Navajo, Miss Navajo.
And she was a teacher of weaving. That's Crystal's grandmother. And Crystal's grandmother, who's in Miss Navajo, that is Sarah Natani is her grandmother. Because we filmed a scene with her grandmother in Miss Navajo, but we cut it because it just didn't have a place for it. So I was looking and I was thinking, oh my God, I need a traditional grandmother. I need a traditional, because we're losing a lot of our traditional grandmothers. Mm-hmm. And I was just stumped. I need somebody who weaves. I need somebody who speaks the language fluently. And then, like I said, everything's always in front of your face. It's like, it's there. And I just was like, Crystal's grandmother, Sarah Natani, gave them a call out of the blue. They're like, huh? What? They didn't know anything about movies. And so I went and had a couple of meetings with them. And she came on set and blew us away.
That's fantastic.
That's a great story.
Well, let's see. Coming full circle, Billy, you're in the process of adapting Miss Navajo into a feature film.
Yes. A series. TV
series. Ooh, even better. Even more excited.
This Miss Navajo script keeps evolving. Like I said, when I was making it as a script, and it evolved into a documentary, and then I'm like, all right, I'm going to make this into a feature film. And now I'm like, okay, it's evolved into a TV. Because now you watch television shows, and they're like six episodes, right? You watch a television show, and there's 6 episodes.
Minimally.
Yeah. Basically, now you're watching 6-hour movies, right?
Yes.
That's what television series are now. So I was having a very complicated relationship with my final draft, and putting a 2-hour movie. I don't like 2-hour movies. I like them to be an hour and a half. And there was a lot of things that I wanted to say in this project, this beauty pageant project that I'm working on. So I was like, stop stressing about it. Just make them into episodes. And I'm like, yes, that's a great idea. So it's not an entirely Miss Navajo beauty pageant. It's an indigenous beauty pageant. So I can play around with different tribes and show that these tribes are all very unique. And I want to have fun with it. I already made this tribute to the Navajo women in my life, this pageant. I want to play. I'm looking more into I, Tanya, tone, very rough around the edges, and more humor, and just turn the beauty pageant upside down, the concept of pageants. And
when you say I, Tanya, that's the skater?
The movie, I, Tanya.
The movie about the Olympic skater.
Yeah, I, Tanya, the movie is just so rough and raw and brutal, and world. That I love writing, humor in a lot of my scripts and my stories. So that's coming. I'm doing a lot of work on it. So yeah.
Will it, dare I say, will it be a period film or from the 20th century? Or
will be present day?
Okay, we'll watch it anyway. I'll watch it.
I am. There's a couple projects that I'm, doing right now are set in the 70s. It's the Redbones band, the name.
Oh yeah, Redbone, yeah.
So I'm working with the family on, the biopic on the Redbone. So we can talk about the Redbone project in the 70s when it happens, because it's an interesting, the 70s are really fascinating. You have AIM, you have the occupation of Alcatraz, you have Wounded Knee, you have all these things that were happening, Brando and the Oscar snafu thing that were happening in the 70s. It's just a fascinating time, indigenous in America during the 70s.
FRYBREAD Face and Me is written and directed by Billy Luther. The feature film is available for streaming on Netflix with a subscription. In an upcoming podcast, we continue our conversation with Billy Luther about working as story editor, writer, and a director for the AMC Plus series Dark Winds. You can stream the first and second seasons of Dark Winds based on the Leaphorn and Chi book series by Tony Hillerman on AMC Plus and Netflix with a subscription. Do a search to find other streaming sources.
Share this podcast with someone you know who will enjoy the conversation. Sign up for the e-newsletter to stay up to date on new podcasts, bonus episodes, and historical drama-related activities. You can find the link on our webpage at michonbostongroup.com/Boston Sisters. Subscribe to Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters wherever you enjoy your favorite podcast. Leave a review. Michon and I hope you give the podcast 5 stars. Follow us on Instagram at Historical Drama Sisters and on Facebook at Historical Drama Boston Sisters. Like and share Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters on your social media.
This is Michon Boston.
And this is Taquina Boston.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters, a podcast about historical films and series dramas. Visit our webpage at michonbostongroup.com/Boston Sisters.
Tell us what historical dramas you're watching. Who knows? We may do a show about it. Sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the podcast, and share it with the people you know who binge on historical drama.
Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters is brought to you by the Michon Boston Group. The views and opinions expressed on Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters are those of the speakers and do not represent the positions or views of the Michon Boston Group, its clients, or affiliates. This is Michon Boston.
And this is Taquina Boston. Thank you for listening.